What's everyone thankful for?
Coffee.
Coffee, me too. This is number 3, I think.
I'm only on number 1.
Ah, number 1 is around 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay, what else? Donna, where were you on vacation?
Just a beach house in Panama City.
Nice.
Yeah, it was nice. It was private, so we were able to social distance for the most part.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, let's hear one more. Julian, what are you grateful for? You got lots to be grateful for, right?
Yeah, the market seems to be holding strong. So I'm grateful that we've made it this far through the virus.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think people are, for better or for worse, maybe a little bit more relaxed. What it's allowing us to do is oftentimes to get into properties with a little less headache. But don't forget, it's not just about what your customer or your client is comfortable with. It's also what you're comfortable with, right? So don't just overlook that part, okay? All right, beautiful. You guys are here for negotiation, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we can go a lot of different directions with this. And as normal, I'm prepared to go in a lot of different directions. One thing I want to start with, though, is an idea about negotiation, which a lot of people don't often think about. And then we'll take a little, some comments and some questions from the crew. So here's what one of my primary thoughts is. Oh, hey, it's Ebony on Heather's Zoom. What's up? Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. So here's the deal with negotiation, okay? You gotta, when you're entering into a negotiation, whether it's you trying to get something you want or whether it's you representing somebody who's trying to get what they want, you have to take really kind of the pulse of the environment, okay? We gotta know like how much power we have, for lack of a better way to put it, right? If I'm one of 17 offers, I don't have a whole lot of negotiation power. Okay, don't be asking for a home warranty if you're one of 17 offers. Okay, you better be as responsive as you've ever been in your entire life if you are representing a buyer trying to, one of 17 trying to buy a home. Okay, you got to understand where your power lies and where it does not lie. Okay, so if you don't have a whole lot of negotiation power in a situation like that working for your buyer, what are you able to control, right? You might be able to share with the other agent how well qualified the buyer is. You might have the lender of that buyer call the listing agent and say, hey, you received an offer from a borrower of mine. Their name is Julian Harris, and I know they submitted an offer on your listing at 123 Hill Street, and I just wanted to take a minute to let you know how well qualified this buyer is, how cooperative they've been, and how much of a simple transaction this is going to be for everyone that's fortunate enough to work with this buyer. You think they're getting a lot of those calls? No. Right. So when you don't have a lot of flexibility in the terms, think about what you do have flexibility in. What you have flexibility in is to gain influence, right, with the people that are your future partners, hopefully. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, let's say, for example, we get in a time machine and we go back 10 years, right? And it's 2012 or something. And you are helping a buyer buy a townhome in a neighborhood where there's 15 townhomes available, and they've all sat around for a month. And they all virtually look the same, right? The only major differences are, okay, well, this one has, you know, dark countertops, and this one has lighter countertops, and this one's room, the room is light blue, and this one, the room is light gray, right? They're essentially the same place, right? So if I go to my favorite one and I say, hey, I'd like to buy your place for $250, and they're like, no way, then I just go to the next one and say, hey, I'd like to buy your home for $250. You see what I'm saying? I got lots of power there. So I don't necessarily need to spend my time or energy going out of my way to tell the listing agent how great the buyer is. I'm just going to find the seller who's going to give me the best terms. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, remember, negotiation is occurring 24 hours a day virtually. Okay. If I meet another agent at, let's say, an on-site community, right? I bring my buyer to a new home neighborhood. We are negotiating from the minute we get on that property, right? With the way that I conduct myself, with the questions I ask, the way I ask them, the questions my buyer asks, with the way they ask them, right? You know, you got to be super careful at the way you're communicating, because you're always communicating. Always. You can never not communicate. Does that make sense? Make sure you heard that. You can never not communicate. So you're always going to be sharing something about how you may behave in the future, right? I'm going to give you everything you want without care, or I'm going to keep my, you know, kind of cards close to the vest, right? I think I've told this story many times to you guys, but this is a good example of negotiation. Okay. The last home that my wife and I bought, we bought off market. Okay. As you know, there's not a lot of incentive for a seller to sell their home off market. The only reason they should do that is if they are absolutely convinced that they're going to get a better deal off market than on market. Does that make sense? Because they basically let one person know the home was available, rather than 8 billion people had they put it on the MLS, right? So the only reason why they should have agreed to sell it to me is if I was going to give them better pricing or better terms, right? So don't take my negotiation strategy, and please understand this was a moment in time, but my wife and I negotiation strategy at the end of our showing was, what do you want to not show this to anyone else? And they named a price that I thought was reasonable, and we moved forward. Make sense? So I had absolutely no power. The only thing I could control was the fact that I didn't want anyone else to see it. Does that make sense? So the first thing you got to do when you're negotiating is kind of get clarity on what your other options are. You're only as good of a negotiator as your next best choice, right? If you're at a buffet, you can pick up whatever you want. If you're on a deserted island and you're hungry and somebody comes around with carrots and you hate carrots, well, guess what? You're going to eat some carrots, right? What are you guys hearing?
I'm hearing that even if you don't talk, you're talking.
That makes me feel so much better about how you guys are quiet sometimes in the morning. Okay, I like that. I like that.
Because if you're silent, they hear the silence. And so in some places that makes people, it'll do one of two things. It makes people feel like you're not interested, or that they better do something better themselves to get your interest, depending on their motivation.
That's right. So if you say, let's say, Heather, you're the listing agent and I'm the seller, okay? And I say, so what is your commission? Because I really don't want to pay a lot of commission. And you say proudly, with straight back and confident, my commission is 6%. And half of which goes to the other agent and half of that goes to the broker, blah, 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 blah. And I just sit there. Am I negotiating? In silence. And then what are you thinking? Oh my gosh, was I confident enough? Oh my gosh, did I explain enough of where all the nickels went so that they think it's justified? Oh my gosh, should I offer 5%? He's still being quiet. Oh my gosh, what about 4.5%? He hasn't said a word. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to get the listing. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And the next person that speaks is the one that's going to lose.
Yep.
And because I've done this a long time, I know that I'm not going to speak. Right?
So
I'm willing to control.
unless you laugh and say, oh, unless you think I'm good enough, you want to give me 7.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'd be happy to negotiate. I'd be happy to go from 8 to 7. Is that what you were looking for, sir?
No, I mean, if you have 6 and you're like, you're really quiet. Did you expect to pay me more? Do you want to give me 7?
I love that. That's great. That's a way to, did you guys hear on Michelle Slater's video last week? She said, I love this line. Like, so how come you chose to list your home yourself? Do you like hate realtors or something? Right? That kind of lightens the mood a bit. No, I don't hate realtors. Oh, great. Well, I'm here to help you. What can I do to help you? You see what I'm saying? It just changes the who's in control to some degree. It changes who's got the leverage on negotiation to some degree, right? Now it might be easier for you to negotiate your way into an appointment or into their home or into another round of questionings. Does that make sense? Right? Like if I say, hey, Rachel, what are you making for dinner tonight? And she looks at me, she's like, I've been with your kids all freaking day. I'm not making anything for dinner tonight. Well, guess what? I ain't got no power. So if I expect to eat or spend the night there, I'm either going to bring something home or make it myself. Does that make sense? I got no negotiation power. That's very clear. Does that make sense? So the first thing to do is figure out who's in control. And if you're not in control, is there anything that you can control? Right? You know, multiple, and by the way, I said earlier, you're always negotiating. Remember, this is a very large community of real estate agents, yet it's very small too, right? I've got a lot of agents, I would say maybe, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 agents I could call and say, hey, Julian, I see you have that new listing on Hill Street. My buyer's interested. What's it going to take? And Julian will say, oh my gosh, Bill, I remember you. That deal was so easy 2 years ago. The lender was awesome to work with. The closing attorney was awesome to work with. You're just such a professional. Just give me $325, no closing costs, and the house is yours. I'm like, whoa. See what I'm saying? So you're going to negotiate with the way you conduct business, with the way you speak, with how organized you are, these kind of things. Okay. Silence, I'm glad you pointed that out, Heather. Silence is speaking. What other, when you think of negotiation, what do you struggle with? What would you like some advice or some guidance on? Where do you believe you're super strong or not so strong?
So I have a question, Bill. So when you are submitting your offer, you can either request a due diligence period,
Yep.
right? And then do an amendment to address concerns later after the inspection.
That's right.
Or you can do a no due diligence period and attach a right to request repairs.
Yeah, that's another option.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
So asking for no due diligence period would be more appealing to a seller if you're not asking for a due diligence period, or, I mean, which one do you think is better?
I got to tell you, I think that a lot of agents do try to use that. I'm going to ask you for a right to request repairs rather than a due diligence. I'll explain the two differences in 1 second. The language even on the right to request repairs is so vague that just about anything would qualify anyway. And I just don't think that's quite as valuable as a lot of other, or as strategic as a lot of other agents might think it is. Plus, you're going to end up spending half the time trying to explain it to them because most agents don't have a clue what you're talking about. So right to request, let's review due diligence really fast. Due diligence, remember, is essentially a free look period, right? Buyer gets a binding contract, and let's just say they have 10 days. So they have 10 days to do whatever they want to do. Inspections, no inspections, their aunt comes in, their uncle comes in, their cousin comes in, makes no difference. Look at the property, and for any reason whatsoever, inspection related or otherwise, right? They can leave the contract without penalty. During that time period, generally, they have all their inspections, they do all their research, they check the sex offenders list, they check the school districts, they check the crime rates, all the stuff that might impact their desire to move into that home, right? And then they submit something called the Amendment to Address Concerns to the seller saying, hey, this has got wood rot, I want you to fix it. Hey, toilet's not working, I want you to replace it. Hey, roof's got a leak, I want you to deal with that, right? And then that's a second series of negotiation. And then you bind the contract again after that document, that amendment's been executed. Seller is under no obligation to fix anything, and buyer is under no obligation to stay in the contract, even if they agree to fix the stuff, okay? Right to request repairs is, it basically says like, I think the word they use is, what is it, mechanical failure or system problem, something like that. It basically is saying like, if there's any like defects, material defect is what they call it, right? So material defect, that is still a very loose term, right? An air conditioning system that might not be registering the proper temperature differential, that could count, right? Termites could count, a roof leak could count. An aging water heater could potentially even count. Like there's a lot of things that they say, oh, got a leaking roof, we're out, right? I just don't think that's quite as effective as people wished it was. And if I was on the listing side, I don't know that I would be so, that's not going to sway me more than money, if that makes sense, right? The things that I would do, I would, if I was on the buyer side and I was trying to stand out from the crowd, what I would do is maybe nix the appraisal contingency if I knew that the price was fair, right? And what I would probably do is push to have the appraisal done within the due diligence period, right? That's one thing. I would definitely get rid of all the random stuff, right? Make sure that termites, you know, you can inspect for termites. If there's an issue, you can leave the deal, but don't clutter the special stipulations with a bunch of termite language, right? Don't ask for home warranty. All the time periods, tighten them as much as you can, right? Increase the earnest money, decrease the closing cost, increase the sales price. You got to win first, then you'll deal with all the other stuff. If you don't win, none of that other stuff matters. Does it make sense? So, and then I would have an incredibly strong, loving conversation with the other agent. I would let them know that there is not another realtor in town that is going to work harder than me to get that deal closed. And I feel so confident in that. And I partnered with people that feel the same way, from the closing attorney to the lender, to the home inspector, to everybody. We are all focused on getting your home sold. And I just want to remind you that there's going to be no problems on this side of the deal. Okay. Anything you need, you call me. Got it. Right. This is a wonderfully cooperative buyer. This is a wonderfully respondent buyer. You need something signed, we're gonna have it signed for you in 2 minutes, right? If they don't know that, or they don't hear that from the other people, they think that we're unique in some way. Make sense? Okay, great question. Thank you, Donna. Who else? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you got out negotiated?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to share that story, Rose?
Are you talking about like by another offer?
No, like you personally, like you gave it your best shot and you felt like maybe the, well, how do I want to go in this direction? There are times, let me paint a picture for you, and then you can share your story real fast. So I'll tell you a story about how, so I was at a final walkthrough one day with a buyer. Oh my gosh, I showed this buyer so many homes. All this gray hair is from that buyer. Okay, all of it, every strand. Okay, and we just had a hell of a transaction together. And we're at the final walkthrough, and we had the air conditioning system was supposed to be cleaned, okay, or serviced or cleaned, I think is the word, right? And so we open it up, of course, because he wanted to open it up. and he found that it wasn't clean to his satisfaction. Okay, still working perfectly, everything's good, right? We got a home warranty, the whole thing's flawless, right? So he says, well, I'm not coming to closing. I said, well, what do you want? And he said, I want $2,500 to come to closing. I said, okay, fine. So I go to the other agent and I said, my client's not going to close. So what are you talking about? He's not going to close. Air conditioning wasn't cleaned properly. Knock $2,500 off the price. We'll see it closing. They said, are you kidding me? I said, no, not at all. So just let me know, because we won't be at closing until we get this answer. Right? I'm totally bluffing. Right? And the other side comes back about 10 minutes later and says, we'll do 15. I said, great. Let me see what he says. Right? So he says, great, 15. Now I just need 1,000. And I said, so you're not going to come to closing unless you get 1,000? He said, that's right. And I said to myself, am I about to get out negotiated here? And then I said, I'll see you at 12 o'clock. You ain't getting back in my car. Right? That wasn't losing negotiation. That was making a business decision. Does that make sense? There's a very fine line there. I was willing to part with $1,000 of my money to not deal with him again and start this entire process again. Does that make sense? So I didn't lose that negotiation. I made a strategic decision. So Rose, sometimes we're going to make strategic decisions and sometimes we're just flat going to get outskilled. So can you think of a time, you don't have to share if you don't want, can you think of an experience that you felt like you were outskilled?
Back in March, there was just one big hiccup in the transaction where the house appraised for 10,000 less, and the seller was the agent and she had flipped it, so she was trying to net a certain amount.
Right.
But my buyer was using a USDA loan, so she didn't have any money to put down.
Right.
And of course we couldn't do an extra 10,000. So that's the only time where I felt like I wasn't prepared for that negotiation. But what I ended up doing was working with the listing agent to challenge the appraiser. And even though I knew that that I wasn't going to be successful in challenging the appraiser, I just wanted to show the agent that I was willing to work with her so that we could both get to the closing table. And of course, us challenging the appraiser didn't come out to our liking.
But you did close.
We did close, yes, because she saw that I was willing to help her out. And she agreed to knock the price down, $10,000.
Wow. Your client, great work. Your client should hopefully never forget you for that.
Hopefully.
In all honesty, you took stock of your situation. That's what negotiation is all about, right? Understanding what your options are, understanding the other party and their desires and what their options are, and determining what makes the most strategic sense, and then going into that direction.
Yeah.
You said to yourself, the first person that can solve this issue is the appraiser. Let's attack that first, right? Let's have a positive attitude. Let's be super professional and let's do our part, right? When that didn't work, she says, oh my gosh, these poor people buying this USDA property, they don't have any cash. I think I'll just make it happen, right? So you did much more than you're giving yourself credit for.
Yeah, and that was about the 5th home. Because it was a USDA loan, at the time in March, like nobody wanted to accept that offer. So it was like the 5th home we'd put an offer on in just a week. And we finally got it because she had like waited to the last second to find a house. She had to be out of her apartment as soon as possible. So it was crazy.
But your action, by the way, so you should get even more credit now, because what happened is you took stock of your client's specific situation at that moment and you behaved accordingly in the most strategic way, right? So when you hear the phrase negotiation, what I don't want you to hear is there's some like magical line that you're going to say to somebody and they're going to just say, oh, whatever you want, you can just write the contract for us, we'll see you at closing. Like, that's not really the way that it works, right? Negotiation is simply understanding the environment that you are trying to be successful in, and then taking the approach that makes the most sense for your client, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you another example. When we sold our townhome a couple months ago, right, it had been on the market for a few months. And so they offered me less than the last sale. And I said, well, geez, what am I going to do? I don't have any other offers, right? We're about to go on like literally lockdown. Like, what are my options here? And I did my best to increase the price, which I did a little bit from that guy's offer. Did I sell it for less than the last guy sold it for? Yeah, we're in the middle of a pandemic, for crying out loud. There wasn't anyone else that wanted my home. And I didn't want it, right? So I made a strategic move to sell it, right? So don't think that you're like always losing the negotiation if you understand that you're just making a strategic move based on the fact that you don't have a whole lot of power in the first place.
Yeah, and I like what you said earlier about it's not like I'm going to say something magical and everything's going to go my way, because I think that's what my current client thinks, because she texted me when we put in an offer, which didn't get accepted, but when we put in an offer, she was like, she said, work your magic. And I was just sitting there thinking, I don't know what that means.
What she meant was, you are a professional, full-time, learning-based agent that's part of the #1 training organization in the world in productivity coaching, and I'm sure that somebody has helped guide you through the best approach. That is not look on page 34 for the secret phrase, right?
Yeah.
I hope you guys didn't tune in today for the secret phrase, because there's not really one, right? Probably the biggest secret phrase is, hey, tell me your perfect scenario. And then you shut up and you listen to what their perfect scenario is. And that way you're going to hear exactly what they want and why they want it. If you're somewhat unclear, say, hey, tell me a little bit more about that, please. Right? Why is that important to you? And you really get to hear their emotions, and you really get to hear where they are kind of mentally. Then you know how to be strategic with them, right? If I'm negotiating, let's say, with a potential listing, and I say, okay, Mr. Seller, you've probably bought and sold a lot of homes. Tell me a little bit about some of your favorite experiences with realtors. Okay, tell me a little bit about some of the most stressful or most disappointing experiences that you've had with realtors, right? Are you not negotiating? I believe you are, because you're hearing exactly what they want and you're hearing exactly what they do not want. And then based on that, you can tweak the rest of your presentation. Okay, so you want to text every Friday morning? Matter of fact, we text all of our clients every Friday morning, right? You don't want me to call you before 12? Good, I'm lead generating before 12. See what I'm saying? So whatever they want, that's what you do. That's negotiating, right? But I don't know how to weave that in, or whether that's even important to weave in, until I've asked them what they want. Negotiation is simply gathering information and then having the appropriate skill set and the appropriate patience and the appropriate language skills to communicate how you need to communicate, right? Any final thoughts? Was this helpful?
Yes.
Very
All right,
helpful.
let's try this again. If this has been the best morning of your life, I want you to be in silence. All right, awesome, you did great.
I've got a quick question, Bill. Mark, I had a potential listing appointment call me yesterday. They are now switching to buyer role, and I sent them 7 or 8 quadruplexes, and they're all residential, but one of them contained a storefront and 3-story building. Are those only handled by commercial realtors, that building?
Generally, yes.
So I would contact a KW commercial agent, sort of bring him in on that building.
That would be my recommendation, yes, because what would end up happening otherwise is you're going to feel the need. First of all, you're going to be a pretty poor negotiator for your client while we're on the theme of negotiation, because you don't know what you're doing, right?
What's
And
wrong with laying down on the curb and crying? I mean, that's a strong negotiating tool, right?
Sorry?
I was just kidding. No, I agree. That was my first instinct, was turn it to a commercial realtor, because it's definitely a commercial building with some residential on top.
Yeah, so you can reach out to one of our agents here at the office and say, hey, I've got an opportunity. Would you like to work this with me? Or what do you think about this, right? Of course, you get a referral fee, by the way, right?
Yeah, and I don't know them. Who do you recommend?
For that, I would probably call Joel Fulgham or Mark Ellsworth. Probably Joel, though.
Thank you.
Okay. And don't be so compelled to like do it with them and learn commercial for like the one commercial deal you might get every 3 years. Focus on what you're good at. Okay. You know, I've heard the line, hey, oh, what's the referral fee? Oh, if you give it to me, it's 25%. If you want to work it with me, it's 50%, because you're going to slow me down. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes we want to learn everything, when the narrower your focus gets and the more you focus on how to master your skills and master FSBOs or expired or circle of influence or whatever, that's where the magic really is. Okay. So we're not done talking about negotiation. We'll continue to talk about it at any time. If you have issues with a particular negotiation that you're in, obviously let's help that person as a group, and I'm more than happy to help you as a leader too. Remember the final takeaway though is the more you get, the better you get at language skills, right? The better you are going to be able to take strategic action once you know where the power lies. Okay. So the first question when you're have an opportunity to play out a negotiation is to try to analyze, what are my options here, right? What do I really want, right? How badly do I really want it, right? And also, is there another side involved, which clearly there is, right? So if Julian and I are buying and selling each other's homes, like, I can't just like get everything I want and completely screw over Julian. Like, it's a negotiation. There's going to be some things you win and some things you do not win, right? So for example, if a buyer has a USDA loan and they've got no cash, right, they might have to be a little bit more flexible on the other terms so that the seller agrees to work with that type of loan. You see what I'm saying? If I need to close in 65 days, is that something the other party is going to agree to do, right? So every time that you make somewhat of an unusual request, you have to understand that it may not be something that's in the best interest of the other party, and therefore you might have to give them something, right? So, hey, I'll give you the closing attorney if you give me the closing costs. Sound fair? You see what I'm saying? Like, don't expect to get 100% of everything you're asking for. Does that make sense? But part of being a great negotiator for your people is to identify what's most important to them and then work extra hard to get them that. Make sense? All right, y'all. Don't forget about the team meeting today. I have booked not this Friday, but the following Friday, we're going to do a session with Kern Schwartz at O'Kelly, and I should have hopefully not too much time goes on before I book the one for this Friday, but we're still going to do a success series at 12 o'clock this Friday. The person is about to be finalized. And that's it. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bill.